Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasts.
There is so much power in sharing your story. It helps you come out better on the other side because you actually start to love yourself, respect yourself, and know your self-worth. Once you know those things, your potential is unlimited.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. If this is your first time here, or welcome back. This is True Crime Connections, and I'm Tiffany, your host. This week, we are talking about mental toughness after trauma. Joining us this week is Seth Gehle. He's a veteran, a survivor, motivational speaker, author, jack of all trades. So first, I want to say thank you so much for your 8 years of service before we dive into anything. I truly appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And so, not sure exactly where in your story that you wanted to start. I know around 2 years old is when your father almost killed your mother. I believe he stabbed her behind the ear.
Yep, that's right. Yeah. So I mean, I don't obviously I don't remember that I was so young, but they got into an argument, and it's a he said she said between the two of them to this day, of course. And so they got into an argument. There was a knife that was brought out. My mom ended up catching the blade behind the ear and was nearly killed. And so my father went to prison for quite a while. I think probably 6-7 years or so, because I never had him around growing up, and I actually met him in prison. So that was my earliest memory of my father's meeting him in prison.
Great memories, right?
Yeah. I don't have the traditional like playing baseball in the front yard with dad or throwing the football across the street. Like I didn't have any of that. I'm playing. Which never really struck a nerve with me until recently. As I've kind of grown into fatherhood over the last few years, it's kind of bothered me more not growing up without a father, because I try to be such a present and intentional father. So whenever I am, sometimes I'll get sad because I'm just like, man, I would have given anything to have a father like me when I was, my son's age or my daughter's age. So I don't know how much it bothered me as a young man, but what I'll say is, like, when you're growing up with a single parent, you're automatically subjected or statistically disadvantaged, right, in many, many ways. So all kinds of problems can come from single parent households. And my mom was a single parent of 3 kids. So we were in babysitters' houses all the time. And so when I was 5, I was at a babysitter's house, and one of their kids would end up molesting me. He was a teenage kid. And that wasn't anything like, I say it wasn't anything crazy, but all he did to me was expose himself and maybe like a little bit of touching here and there. But I don't think that was anything crazy at that time, compared to what would eventually happen to me. So anytime a kid's molested or exposed to that kind of stuff, obviously that's terrible. But just in the grand scheme of what would go on in my life, it just wasn't that bad. So anyways, yeah. So that happened when I was 5, and then when I was about 6 or 7, 8 years old, maybe, I met my father in prison. We went to go see him one day, and I finally got to meet him. But growing up, when you grow up with a single mother of 3 kids, you just raise yourself. So, me and my 2 sisters, we just took care of ourselves. We cooked the food, did the dishes, cleaned the house, all that good stuff. But with all that, you're exposed to a lot, and you grow up really quick. So, being 5, 6, 7 years old, I don't, like, you had fun. There were definitely good days, but it's not like my kids' days, or my kids' days are generally full of just kid things and laughter and love and joy. They're not doing the dishes and the laundry. Like, they get to be a kid. So that's I missed a lot of that growing up. And then when I was like 9 or 10, my mom, she met a guy who would get her hooked up on like crack and cocaine. And then she also became very abusive around that time. She had always kind of been a disciplinarian parent, always whooped us, which wasn't a problem. But when I was about 9 or 10, she started like close hand punching us, grabbing us by the face, slamming heads against the walls, kind of very rough environment. And to pair that with the drugs as well, right? And so at the same time, I had met a friend through a friend of mine. So I met this guy who's like 30 years old through one of my friends who lived around this corner from me. And he basically invited me to come up and play video games at his house with my other friend. So for the sake of the story, this kid Jacob that I knew, he knew the old guy, and the old guy's name was Mondo. We always called him Mondo. That was his nickname. So Mondo would invite me to go with him and Jacob up to his house to play video games and all that stuff. So I was like, yeah, let me go ask my mom. So I go and ask my mom, and I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, yeah, whatever. Like, we're just gonna go play video games, not a big deal. And I go up to his house, and for about 2 to 3 months, the first few months, he was just kind of working on that grooming phase. Looking back on it, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was just like that the grooming phase had taken its course, and he made his first little move probably 2 or 3 months after knowing him. And I would go to his house every weekend too. So like every Friday night after school, he'd come and pick me up. I'd go to his house Friday, Saturday night, and then I'd go home Sunday. Pretty much every weekend, that's how it went from that point forward. And so between Monday through Friday, I was living with my mom. Going through the abuse, the drugs, seeing drug abusers coming in and out of the house every day, which was just insane. Seeing when you see somebody who's so high that they look like a zombie, they're sitting there shaking on your couch, and you're like 10 years old and you're trying to process this. It's kind of crazy. So whenever I tell my story, I just want it to be clear that like I was going through all of these things like simultaneously. It wasn't like one and then the other and then another. It was Monday through Friday. I was dealing with my own hell at home. And then Friday and Saturday night, this guy was molesting me in his house, in his apartment. And I would go to his house every single weekend, like probably 45 to 50 weekends out of the year. I was at his house. And it was the first probably 6 months of the molestation. It was just a lot of touching, and kind of weird comments and talking. But then it would eventually escalate and escalate and escalate. And when I was 13 years old, by that point, I had experienced everything you can experience sexually with this grown man. So when I was 13, that was the first time that he had raped me. And at this point, I was living with my grandparents because my mom was taken away from me. Maybe a few months prior, she was arrested and taken away right in front of me, right in the street. Police came and arrested her, took her away. And so about 4 months after that, I ended up at my grandparents' house. And when I got to my grandparents' house, I told them about this guy, and they're like, no, like, we're not doing this. You're not hanging out with this grown man. And I defended him because you're in this like psychological like war, and it's just insane what it does to you. And so I defended the guy, and I was like, no, 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 he's not like that. This, whatever. So he meets my grandparents, and he kind of sneaks his way into the house, basically. He earns their trust, and so boom, I'm right back in the trap and going to his house every weekend again, playing video games, eating pizza, drinking pop, staying up all night. There's no rules, and like I said, my that was when I was 12, and so my grandparents, the adoption and all that stuff would eventually go through when I was 13. But around that same time is when I guess it's like the capitalization, or I don't know the right word for it, but his plan had come to fruition, right? Like his plan to have sex with this little boy had finally come to fruition, and he had accomplished his ultimate goal, apparently. That happened when I was 13, and that was probably one of the worst nights of my life. Obviously, I had been suicidal for several years at that point because of my mom and that situation, but also being molested. You're just tired of living. Like, you're just exhausted, and it messes you up. And so I thought about killing myself almost daily. And that night that he raped me, I remember sitting on his toilet after it was all done and just getting everything out of my body. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this is it. Like, my life is over, like people are going to think I'm gay. People are going to think I have HIV. People are going to think I have like diseases. People are going to think like all of these things of me if they find out. So you just don't say anything. You just kind of keep going through the pain. And that went on for about 2 more years. When I was almost 16, I was up at his house, and a younger friend of mine was with me, and that kid was getting groomed as well. And I could see it happening in front of me. So it's kind of crazy because the guy that was doing it, the same comments and same things he would do to me, he was doing to this kid right in front of me. So it's the way I kind of look at it is like if I was texting another girl right in front of my wife, or flirting with another girl right in front of my wife, it'd be like, the audacity, like, you're gonna do that right in front of me. And so I wasn't jealous, but I was just like offended, like no, we're not doing this, like the buck stops here, like nobody else. And so I saw that happening. I saw the kid go back in his bed one night, and that was the first time I can remember that happening. So that weekend, I was actually raped that weekend as well. But I would eventually go home that weekend on Sunday. I told my grandparents. I said, "Hey, this is what happened." And they were torn apart, obviously, because they let this guy in the house, and he was part of our holidays. I went to his holidays. I knew his whole family. He had sisters with kids, and like I knew I mean, we had been friends for almost 6 years at this point, and it was brutal, right? So, um, we go to the hospital. We do the rape kit and everything. The police shows up and he's like, "Hey, we need to go arrest this guy, but they need to have something pretty concrete because they want to be able to catch him like now, and they don't want to go say something and then he's able to walk or whatever." So I told him, I was like, "Hey, well, you can test my body. I was like, you guys, I know I have his DNA on me because I'm at 15 years old. I knew to go home and not take a shower, don't take my clothes off, keep all that stuff on me so that when I go to the hospital, I'll be able to catch him. Like I had this in my head, like I've got to do this to stop this guy from doing it to anybody else." And so when I told that to the nurses, they were really happy and like impressed with me. So I like to talk about that just because it's kind of impressive in my opinion that a 15-year-old kid like kind of knew I've got to do this. I can't take a shower. I can't take my clothes off. Um, and so that happened, and they swab me, they test me, they test my clothes, they find his DNA in several places, and I tell this cop about there's this towel, and I guarantee him, I said there's this towel that he used to clean me up when he was done next to his bed, and it's got Vaseline on it, and it's got my DNA on it. I guarantee it. And so the cop, I ended up meeting this cop later a couple months ago, but he told me they went to his apartment and he remembers finding the towel, finding the jar of Vaseline, and just everything that I had described was there. And he's like, the way you described it was incredible because we knew exactly where to go once we got into his apartment. So they arrest him. Like a month later, he pleads guilty to everything. He gets 10 years in prison. That was in 2011. So he'd be free today to do whatever the hell he wanted to do. Fortunately enough, he died in 2019, about a year before he was supposed to get out. But he got 10 years of prison. And when I reported him, my friend Jacob, who introduced me to the guy, was there as well. And Jacob actually admitted to being raped and molested by the guy as well. And so this guy got about 10 years of pleasure out of at least two boys, if not more, because he also ran a haunted house in his hometown. And there was like 4,000 kids that would come through this haunted house every year. And he was always at the end handing out candy. He would always be the one handing candy to all the kids, and they had to go through the haunted house to get a piece of candy. So he just got to see all these little kids come through. And it was just like it was a small thing, but it's just crazy to think about. Like these people are just insane. And so, yeah, he got 10 years for that. And that's the part of the justice system that I think is a little messed up because he admitted to raping two boys. But in Ohio, because of all of the situation that was going down, we couldn't prove that I was 13 or under when I was raped or something. There was some kind of crazy timeline. I think if you're 13 and older, it's not rape. It's just sexual misconduct. But if it's 12, yeah, the cop was telling me this.
What?
Yeah, yeah. The cop was telling me this. They were like, yeah, if it's like 12 and under, you can call it rape. But if it's 13 and over, it's considered like sexual misconduct. So they can't hit him with like rape charges, or it lessens the charge basically, And so that's like where my long-term goal is kind of like fixing some of these things, because I think if you molest a child for 5 years, like you deserve life. Like there's no recourse. You need to be either executed or you deserve life. Like there's nothing that's going to bring you back into society. Even if you do it once or twice, I don't think it's right. But to do it for 5 years or 10 years and just get a 10-year slap on the wrist. And this guy got 10 years of pleasure, like I said, with two kids at least, and then he gets free healthcare, free food, free lodging for 10 more years, before he goes back out into society. So it's just a twisted thing. But nonetheless, he goes to prison. I moved on with my life. I joined the Army, served in the Army for 8 years right out of high school. And I got out of the Army, and I've just done a really incredible job with my life since then. I worked at a home building company, and I was the number one construction manager in the entire country for quite a while. I was a construction manager of the year. I was recognized by the National Association of Home Builders in Las Vegas at the International Builder Show. I got to go on a stage in Las Vegas and like give the speech to receive this award, which is just crazy because at like 27, 28 years old, to speak to a room full of like these millionaires and these people in suit and ties, it's like, man, you guys have no idea the shit that I've gone through to freaking be here. And in my life, since, like I said, since all that's happened, I've in the last 7 months, I've ran 5 ultra marathons. So I've done like 30-mile races, 40-mile, 50, 60-mile races. I do jiu-jitsu now, and I now I work at a commercial construction company, but I'm a husband, I'm a father, and I'm writing a book. So my book will be done later this year, and that's just the whole cap to the story, right? It's like this like complete like 180 from where I was at 10 years old, 12 years old, 13 years old. Like if you'd go back and tell that kid who was spending all this time in this guy's bed that, hey man, you just hang on, like it's all going to come around, I wouldn't have believed it then, like I was just in such a dark place. So to be where I'm at today is incredible, truly. But I know that my story is not about me, it's about everybody else. And so whatever I can do to help others with my story, and that's what I'm trying to do now. So that's why we're here.
It's so important to talk about it, and you really don't hear about it that much from men because,
Yeah.
like exactly what you said, they're going to look at me different. They're going to think I'm gay. It has nothing to do with that. Nothing at all. It's what this other person has done to you. And it's just the thing that pisses me off about pedophiles and all this shit is, yes, they get slap on the wrist, but it's a disease. Like, okay, say he would have done his 10 years and got out. You think he wasn't going to do it again? I guarantee he would have.
Yep.
I feel like these people need to do longer sentences for sure, if not life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's if you murder somebody, you're going to get a pretty hefty sentence. There's a guy, for example, Clark Fredericks. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he has a crazy story. He kind of similar to mine, where he was raped as a young man by a guy who's a police chief, priest, all these things. Well, he goes back like 30 years later and finds the guy. And it's kind of this like long story, but he ends up murdering his abuser like 30 years later, stabs him to death and cuts his throat in his living room. Clark gets a life sentence for going back and killing this guy who is credited for like hundreds of molestation cases where this police chief had molested people for like 30, 40 years, all kinds of people, teenagers, boys, everybody, because he worked at this jail. And so Clark goes back and murders him. This same guy also molested Clark's brother, his I believe older brother. And so Clark gets a 25-year sentence, or he was facing a 25-year sentence. The judge, and because of the situation, fortunately enough, gave him, I think, 5 years maybe, or 5 or 10 years. I think he got 10 years. And so Clark's out now. I was just on his podcast as well. But that's like the justice system, it's like Clark had to go back and solve his own problems. And it wasn't right, technically, for him to go back and murder the guy. But nobody blames him for it, But these guys that are doing it, they're going to get a 5-10 year sentence. They know if they plead guilty, they'll be okay. They're not going to get a life sentence. They're going to get out and go right back to doing what they're doing. And in America, this is the most profitable place to do it. So it's kind of crazy. America is the number one consumer of child trafficking and porn, and the number one requested topic by far is toddlers. It's disturbing, and they know it. They know they're in the right place to do it. In America, we have enough freedoms, and our legal system protects people, unfortunately. Because if you plead guilty, you rid the justice system of having to go through that entire cycle of proving you guilty, right? So if you just plea, that's the plea deal right there. It's like, well, okay, since he's saving us 6 months of investigation, we'll give you, 15 less years in prison. And, it's like, guys, come on, man. But plus you think about like me and anybody it happens to, I'm serving a life sentence. Like my life, I'm serving this for the rest of my life. This is something that I've got to carry with me forever. And the kids that have happened to, that are 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, that are sold into trafficking and drugs and things like that, they live with that for the rest of their lives. And these other people are just walking away scot-free, like there's no problem, basically, so it's heartbreaking to see, so I'm trying to help other people understand that I try not to focus on the justice part of it in regards to healing. I want to fix some of those problems. I'm not there yet. I don't have the platform for it. But for now, my focus is on if something traumatic happened to you, let's focus on you for now. Like you need to focus on you and healing and how you're going to recover and how you're going to move on with your life because there's still a place for you. You just have to we have to address these problems that happen. So that's my main focus at the moment.
Yeah, and you got to forgive yourself because you didn't do anything wrong. You were a child, and so many children will carry that with them forever. Like, I should have said something, I should have done something. No, you were a child and you were just trying to survive. He knew you came from a broken home. Unfortunately, you were an easy target, and he saw that. And he probably knew that he would get away with it for a little while. And that's what they do. I mean, yeah, you're right. Sex trafficking, it's a billion-dollar industry. It's sick. It
Yeah.
is absolutely sickening. I will
Yeah,
never understand.
yeah, they're calculated. They know what they're looking for. That's the thing. This thing I tell people is that they're very strategic. They're very smart. And this guy he was very charismatic. He was funny. He was smart. He could win anybody over anytime we went anywhere because we had other friends that we'd hang out with too on the weekends. And anytime we were at somebody's house, like he was just super charismatic, and everybody loved him. Whatever he said was funny. Everybody got along and agreed with him about everything. And what's crazy is like they'll hide in plain sight too. So, for example, this guy would make comments to other adults with children about like, okay, well, it's time for us to leave. Like, I'm gonna go back to the house and fuck Seth tonight, or I'm gonna go back and Seth's gonna blow me. And like these people, and including myself, we would all just be like, ha ha ha, like that's really funny. And I'm like sitting here like, please, like I'm so tired of this, like because it did going on for, like I said, almost 6 years. And so when you think about like hiding in plain sight, I mean, that's what he was doing. It's just like if I said, yeah, I'm cheating on my wife. Of course I'm cheating on my wife. Everybody's like, ha ha ha, but that's, at some point it's like, okay, like, wait a minute, like this is not funny anymore. Like you can't joke about fucking kids, And so that's what he would do. And that's what he was doing to that kid that was getting groomed. And that's when I was like, all right, this is it. Like we're stopping here. So that's why I reported him. And truthfully, if that kid wouldn't have been there that weekend, I don't know if I would have said anything. Like that's what's kind of scary about it. I think I probably would have just kept trucking along.
I'm just going to ask you, what would have happened if you didn't witness that? Do you think you would have turned, or you still would have been going back?
Yeah, I don't know because I was tired of it, but I can remember sitting there like playing video games and seeing my friend go back there, and I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. Like I was like this is it, Yeah, because he would tell me every weekend like we just got a couple more years until you're 18. Once you're 18, we don't have to hide this anymore. And then he wanted to like be in a relationship with me, So that was like his plan, was waiting until I was 18, and then boom, like we were just going to be able to do this legally. And that terrified me because I knew I wasn't gay. I knew I wanted to have a family. I knew I didn't want to like. It was just a horrible moment or part of my life for me because people, whenever this happens, from what I've heard, a lot of people are able to like dissociate and like get away from it and put themselves in another place or put another person in that place for them. I was never able to do that. I was very present and aware the entire time. So I would be back in his bed for 2, 3, 4 hours at a time. And between the touching and the escalation of like sexual acts and favors, like it would last for hours. And it was just like, I remember laying back there in his bed. It was like black sheets, black blankets. He had like these black sheets that kind of went around his bed and that hung from the ceiling that kind of created the walls of his bedroom. And I can remember being back there and like staring at the wall or the ceiling, just like wanting to go away, wanting to die. Because it's just like God, it just feels like you're drowning back there. It just feels like some heavy water's on you and you just can't do anything about it. So it was horrible. It was a horrible experience. And I wouldn't want anybody else to go through it, So You know, you think sometimes I would think that my life wasn't that bad, but it's like, would you put anybody else through it? No? Okay, well, there's your sign. Like sometimes when I'm telling my story, I don't think it's that bad, but then I hear it played back to me, or I get the reactions from people, and they're just like, "No, that's pretty tough." Yeah, it's. I'm glad. I'm glad that I was able to report the guy because so many victims don't get that closed loop, and once again, that's kind of why I reiterate the reporting to heal for yourself instead of like seeking the justice, because you may not get the justice, but you can heal. You may I didn't get the justice that I wanted either, but I could still heal from it, and that's what's important. Because even if the guy gets a life sentence, but if I don't ever talk about it, and if I don't ever recover from it, well, what good has it done? Like it hasn't really fixed anything. He serves life, and then I end up killing myself anyways. So, if you're going to report and seek help, which I think you should do, then do it for yourself first. If you get justice out of it, great. Like that's a great thing. But you got to, set the expectations and control what you can, and the rest of it's you got to let it go.
Right. Why do you think you kept going back? Do you think in a way you were scared to like let him down?
Yeah, that's actually a good question and a good response because there was one point where when my mom was taken away from me when she was arrested, I was living with like random people, and this I was living with this family right before my grandparents got me, and I told him on a weekend I was on the phone with him one time and I said, hey, like I'm not going to come up to your house every weekend anymore. I'll still visit you, but like I told him I said I have a family now and I don't need you anymore. And when I told him that, he was like, "What do you mean you don't need me?" And then he starts like getting emotional and like basically crying on the phone to this. I was 12 at the time, 12-year-old boy about how much he needs me, how much he loves me, and how much that destroyed him. And like, what do you mean you don't need me? Like I'm gonna kill myself now. And so at that moment, that was probably one of the worst phone calls I've ever had. I remember that phone call so vividly. And he was just tearing me apart, like psychologically. And so the next weekend, I was back at his house because I felt bad. Like I felt bad for leaving him alone. And you can't just walk away because if you just quit going up there, somebody's going to know. You know what I'm saying? Somebody's going to know, like, well, why are you not hanging out with Mondo anymore? I just don't want to go. Well, why not? Well, I don't know. I don't want to go anymore. It's like, so there's a reason, you don't just like lose your best friend over nothing. So there was that fear of like letting him down, and then when I lived with my mom, it was just getting out of the house. Like when I lived with my mom, you're dealing with the drugs and the violence during the week. We were on welfare. We didn't have much food. My bedroom, for example, like this is in Ohio in the dead of winter. My bedroom had a hole in the ceiling that was like 4 feet wide and like 2 feet deep, probably up in the corner, and so you could see straight into the attic above, like the attic roof structure, all of that stuff. So my room is exposed to all the weather, like the rain, the snow, everything could just come straight into my room. It's kind of crazy to think about. And I slept on this little like 4-inch mattress, had a thin little blanket, peed the bed every night. So that was the life that I was living. So on the weekends, if all I had to do was like sit in this guy's lap for a couple hours and like let him touch me, but I got to play video games and eat pizza and drink all the pop and the coffee, like I could handle that. And even the first time he touched me, like I knew what I was in for. The first time he touched me, the way I describe it is like I was at the top of the roller coaster and like I hit that last click and it's all of a sudden it's like, that's what we're doing. Like, okay, here we go. Because, I'm sitting on his lap and he kind of grazed my butt and he's like, oh, I'm sorry. And I said, it's not a big deal. It's okay. So he puts his hand back on my butt and he's like, so it's okay if I put my hand here. And as soon as he did that, I knew what he was doing. There was like no confusion at that point. But that's why I say it's like at the top of the roller coaster. Like I hit that last click. I'm like, all right, like we're going for this ride. And I froze up and I could have just walked away right there, right? I could have never went back to his house. But I just kept going. I just kept going. And, for the times that it wasn't being molested and raped, it was a good time for a young kid, but it would eventually turn into just a constant like sexual drive for him. It was just disgusting. So I'm glad that I was there because I put it into it. I don't know how long his like reign of terror would have gone on because it's 1 in 10 report. It happens to 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 4 boys, and only 1 in 10 who are sexually abused or molested, raped, or whatever will actually report it. So I'm glad I'm one of the ones who was able to put an end to the cycle.
Absolutely. You have to, because they get so many slaps on the wrist, it doesn't teach them no. Like if you keep getting caught, like we do a lot of busts and stuff around here, like
Mm-hmm.
they have the stings and everything.
Mm-hmm.
They've caught the same person a few times. Like
Yeah.
clearly you're not being put away for long enough. You still haven't learned your lesson because the repercussions aren't really that bad. So
And what's so crazy about that too is they make so much money off of that. So over a few years, you come back, you keep doing it, and what's even more sickening is that in the government they'll allow it to happen because they'll know it's happening, but they don't want to do anything yet because they got to build the case. And so kids will be getting smuggled, raped, trafficked right in front of them, but they don't want to do it because they got to build the case to put this guy away forever. And I don't blame the agents for it or the people that are doing it, but the government behind it's making these laws and policies. It's like, guys, like we've got to get rid of this. I think technology is changing, the world is changing, and I think some of these laws need to change. Where, for example, if I hack into your Wi-Fi or if I hack into your computer, or you hack into a pedophile's computer, for example, and you find child porn, well, if you hacked into it, that's illegal. You're not allowed to do that to people's stuff, right? Unless you have a reason to. So you can't just hack into anybody's stuff, but you could. And if you find something and you report it, well, you're actually violating like the Privacy Act or whatever, right? Which is just insane to me. Like I understand privacy, I get it, I want my privacy, but if it means to stop like the biggest $1 billion industry in the world from happening, like there needs to be some sort of legality that's changed where I don't know, like you shouldn't have anything to hide. I don't think, especially not in regards to that. Do I have things in my phone that I don't want other people to see? Sure, but
doesn't
there's
compare to
something.
that.
Yeah, there's something there that we got to figure out. That's what I'm trying to like wrap my head around. Like, how do we get to the point where we can investigate these things and we don't have to touch around, beat around the bush on arresting these guys, and if they're, I mean, goodness, I don't know how like we operate, we do these things and we catch somebody and we just don't know what to do with them. They get a couple years. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
I always said that we should make them wear ankle bracelets.
Yeah,
That way,
just for
where they are at all times. Yes, because
yeah.
you are a liability. If you're going to be out walking the streets, we need to know where you are, like where, when, how, all of it. Because if something happens, a kid goes missing or you need to be held accountable for it. And that's like, we really need to work on accountability. We lack that. I mean, look how many politicians and say past presidents, we could go down that little rabbit hole, but so
Yeah.
many of them are making money off of children themselves.
That's what I'm not going to say any names, but there's some organizations out there that are trying to stop this, and they kind of allude to that of like, well, why aren't the politicians doing anything? Well, I don't know. Maybe they got their hands in their pockets. Maybe they got their or somebody's money in their pockets, for these kind of things. There's a interview this guy does. His name's Ryan Montgomery, and he talks about. I'm probably going to mess the story up a little bit, but Ryan Montgomery is like the number one ethical hacker in the world. So this guy's incredible. He can tap into any system he wants. But right now, what he's doing is he's using his abilities to stop child trafficking. And so he has an organization, a nonprofit that he works with, and it's called the Sentinel Foundation, Sentinel Foundation, I think is what it's called. But they're trying to end child trafficking, right? So, but Ryan is on this podcast and he's talking about it, and he talks about a politician. I think it's in Colorado. This is like a few years ago, where the guy was arrested in an airport. He had a 12-year-old girl that he had raped or kidnapped and raped with him, and he was trying to go somewhere else with her. And they arrest him. Well, Ryan found this guy through a website that sells their own children. So people will get on this website and take pictures of their kids in the bathtubs and say, "Who wants them tonight?" And it's legit. It's like not an ad. It's not a funny thing. It's like a real thing. They're really doing this. some people will get on there and talk about like, I want to find somebody who we can have kids and then we can raise them and do this with them and sell them and traffic them. I mean, it's insane. But Ryan finds this guy, finds out he's a politician, sends all this information to the news, sends it to the police, all this stuff, and nobody wants to hear him. Nobody listens to him. And Ryan's got a big name. He's not like this. Like he's not like it's like nobody. Brian's a big deal. And so whatever. 6 months later, the guy gets arrested in an airport, and so Ryan brings it up again. He's like, "I fucking told you guys about this guy 6 months ago, and you could have saved this girl's life, and nobody wanted to listen to me." And this guy was like a state congressman or something like that. I can't remember, but if you Google it, like Colorado Congress guy or state representative pedophile, whatever, it'll pop up. The guy was arrested in an airport with a 12-year-old girl. So that, to your point, maybe there's a reason why there's no extreme laws or we're not allowed to violate somebody's privacy to find out if they're doing something. I mean, in my opinion, like you have like the Epstein thing, like we should be able to go through all their stuff. Like everybody who's on that list, go through it.
Why are we not getting that list? Yes, I wanted to see every name on that list.
Yeah, and you're guilty by association almost, and that's unfortunate. That sucks. Like if I knew somebody, if my best friend was a pedophile, that would suck, right? If I found out he was a pedophile, I'd be like, God dang, man, like what the hell? Like now what do people want to think about me, right? With that being said, if anybody needed to come in my house and search my shit and be like, hey, you were his best friend, you hung out with him every single day, or you went to his resorts with him, we need to see your shit. I'm like, okay, well, here you go. Because I have nothing to hide. So if you have nothing to hide, then go ahead. But right now, I think with my story, it's very fitting because you're seeing it with like it was like the Disney like documentary that just came out, like behind the scenes or behind the cut or something like that, where all of these Disney stars were getting molested and sexually exploited, then obviously Epstein. And there's so many of these stories that are coming out now with these like Hollywood and the Congress guy. And so there's people that are in power that are utilizing it. And like I said, maybe there's a reason why the laws are maybe in their favor per se,
For sure.
So,
money talks and predators walk.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah, I know after talking and hearing like Ryan talk and some of these other organizations that save kids, a lot of them only do it in other countries. So that's what I like about the Elite Foundation or Elite Sentinel Foundation, or it's a goddamn. I'm gonna have to look it up so I don't get the name wrong. But that's what I like about their organization because they focus on American kids. Yeah, it's a Sentinel Foundation is what it's called. So they focus on American kids. I think they do some third world country stuff as well and other countries, but their main focus I think is American kids, if I'm saying that right. But they talk about it, and I've heard other people talk about this too, where it's easier to save kids in other countries because there's no laws. Like you can just run up in somebody's house and find all these drug addicted kids that are being raped and trafficked, and you can just save them. In America, because of our freedom, you can know what's happening next door, but if you don't have like proof without the shadow of a doubt, you can't go in there. You can't do anything about it. And my story is a pretty good example. I talked to Children Protective Services for years, and they would come in and interview me. They knew something was wrong, but they couldn't do anything about it because I wouldn't say anything. And so you can't even protect the child because the child is so brainwashed to protect either the parent, the abuser, the the ringleader of whatever sex trafficking organization they may be a part of. And when you beat a dog, that dog is used to it, and the dog always comes back. And that's how kids are too. When they get beaten, abused, or addicted to drugs, that's all they know. So they're just going to come back to it anyways. So even though we're saving these kids, we don't even have the money or the resources to do what we need to do for them and help them survive and heal and give them a place to live. Meanwhile, we are pouring money into other facets of our country, right? You take the border, for example. The border is getting all this funding and these people are coming across the border. We can't even save our own kids or people that are already in our country, and we're letting all these people come across the border. I think the border thing is a heartbreaking situation. I think we do need to help people, but we have to help our own people too. Like we can't just let a ton of people into the country. So you have the reason why I say that is because like in foster care, there are more kids in foster care than we know what to do with. I just heard this. It's I think 70% of children in foster care will either be sexually abused or they will be trafficked at some point in their life, which is like heartbreaking, you know, because we don't have enough families to take care of these kids. And some of these foster agencies or parents are utilizing the system to get profit out of it and to take these kids in to sell them, to rape them, whatever it is. So there's even if we save 100 kids in a hotel, we don't have the resources for it. So these kids end up back in the same cycle. And this is like a whole another rabbit hole I could go down of like the billions and billions of dollars that we pour into churches. For example, we have these churches that are these massive buildings that are beautiful and they've got speakers and lights and it's this concert venue essentially. And it's like, man, if this building didn't cost $25 million or $30 million or $50 million, if it was, I don't know, 5 million, how much of that money could you take and pour it into something that actually is going to do something? I just don't. That's one thing I don't understand is like I would like to have this conversation with somebody who's a part of a church of like, why does your church cost that much money? Why is this building so big? Why does it need this architecture? Why does it need all of these things when, with your money, you could do other things, So I'm just curious. I'm curious why the money goes in these other places, whether it's the border or other countries. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to save American kids because we don't even know where to put them. So these guys will go to other countries and save them.
And I mean, we don't have the resources to Jesus Christ. Like that way they can start their healing and they don't repeat the cycle. I mean, that happens a lot too. And unfortunately, some of these predators are actually victims themselves. That's all they know. And so we've really got to start getting to the root of why people do what they do and try to fix it at the core. Like we really need to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, it's a long road. I think, like I said, with technology growing, I think that the problem is getting bigger and worse. And there was another guy who was caught in Texas who had like 800 different kids on his phone or in his computer or something like that of like naked pictures of kids and these kids had all sent them to him because he was able to convince them through technology. So the technology problem is making it much, much worse. It's making it, the world is accessible to your children now, right? So it's a lot of neglectful parents too, parents giving their phones or giving their kids iPads, letting them play video games online. Unfortunately, it's just leading down this path of all these things happening, and another thing here's another thing I think that would help is, you see these videos of these, I don't know if you've seen the videos of guys where they catch like pedophiles in Walmart, for example. They say, well, hey, this guy was here to meet a 13-year-old. Excuse me. This guy was here to meet a 13-year-old girl, and they record him. They put it up on YouTube, right? Well, because that person's not affiliated with the law, and it wasn't carried out like with trained law professionals and all these things. Like I could go online right now and get into a chat room, right, and say I'm a 12-year-old girl. I'm looking for a friend. Don't even have to say anything sexual. I'm just looking for a friend to hang out with or looking for whatever. And within seconds, you'll get hit up, right, by 20 people. Out of those 20 people, probably 5 of them are at least, 20 years or older, 30 years or older. And say one of them's like 45. And then you get on this message and you tell the guy, I'm 12. Is that okay with you? Yes. Okay. And you're 45? Yes. Okay, cool. Do you want to meet at Walmart and maybe we can go back to your house and have some fun, right? And then you can even put something in there sexually. You can even allude to sexual acts, right? You can even, if you get good enough at it, you can talk to these people because you have to be careful and you don't, because if they feel it's a trap, then they're just going to back out, right? But it's also, they could know it's a trap and their urge is so sickening, they can't help it. And they're just like, oh yeah, I gotta have it. So even if they think it's a trap, they'll still get sucked into it sometimes. But so the reason why I'm saying all this is because you can do all these things, right? You can set this guy up, you can go to Walmart, you can find the guy there, and then you can say, oh, you're here to meet, my 12-year-old daughter, and you're a pedophile, and you can take that to the police. But because it wasn't executed in a legal fashion, there's nothing you can do to that guy. All we can do is publicly shame him, which is good, but it doesn't stop the problem. He's just going to go back home, get on his laptop, and be a little bit more careful next time, you know? So I think there should be something that we could do about it. It's like the whole Chris Hansen Dateline kind of situation, but now a lot of people are just doing it themselves, without the show, without the police. Or you can just do it yourself and set these people up and go out in public and embarrass them. Which, like I said, I think is good that people are doing this, but it doesn't really fix the problem. But I think that there's something that should be done there. Like there should be some sort of legal law speech or something that says, if it's been proven like via XYZ, like you're on this chat room and you're an adult and you agree and you should be able to look at all these chat logs and be like, okay, like, yeah, I'm sorry, man, you're arrested. Sorry. Like you shouldn't have been doing this shit, but we can't do it. There's that stuff I'm talking about is a lot of it's like open source intelligence is what they call it. But yeah, I mean, you can't do anything to the person because if you go out in public, even if you beat that guy's ass or if you do arrest them, you're actually going to be arrested for putting your hands on this person or whatever, So they'll record them in public because due to the legal speech, when you're in public, you are subject to recording at any time or something along those lines. So it's not illegal to record anybody in public, So that's what they'll do. They'll record them and then they'll go, they'll find out where they work. They'll show up at their workplace and be like, hey, just so you know, you have a pedophile that works for you. And they'll blow up their spot, which, like I said, I think is awesome. But, it would be cool if we could just arrest these people and put them away, But there's a lot of people that do it now. And I mean, you could just look it up on YouTube and like the open source intelligent pedophiles being exposed, things like that. And some of the open source intelligence like programs, what you do is you find out who the guy is and then you get his name and then you send it to the police or you look him up on the sex offender list. And if you find him, then you send that to the police and you say, hey, this person is looking for people in this area, just so you know. And then, you almost build a case for the police and then you send it to the police so that the police can put that person on their radar. That's kind of how I think that's how it's supposed to kind of work. But a lot of people, there's not enough police, there's not enough resources on the police side to execute all of that. So people are just kind of taking it in their own hands. And running with it, so
I'm all right with that.
yeah.
So if a child was listening, well, I think they're not supposed to listen to my show because it says it's explicit, but just in case somebody was listening, what advice would you give them if they were in the same situation?
Well, first off, you need to say something. I know a lot of people have opinions on this where they say reporting is not for everybody. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. And that is true, kind of. You just have to find the right person that you can report to. And when you do report, like when you're ready to report, you need to be ready to like spill the beans. You need to be ready to say everything that's happened to you. Because if you're not, there's a chance that because the more graphic your situation is, the better off it is of saving you. And that's what I was told when I reported. Like I knew I needed to go in there and be extremely detailed and graphic. And I told some disgusting stories that, I could tell again, tell whatever you want me to say, but I had to tell some horrific events that happened to me in very explicit detail so that when the police read it and the prosecutors read it and things like that, there's no holding back on this guy, So I would say you definitely need a report. You just have to find the right person to go to, and nowadays I think it's easier than what it was back when I did it, even though that was 13 years ago. But especially talking 20, 30 years ago, you try to report something, a lot of times it just went in one ear and out the other. So nowadays it's a lot better. It's a lot safer. It's a lot easier. You can report. It's quiet. My situation, nobody found out that it happened to me. Like it wasn't exposed in the news. So number one is just report. You have to say something. You're going to save yourself. You're going to save somebody else. And when you do report, like I said, focus on healing yourself. If you don't find justice, that's okay. Focus on healing yourself, protecting yourself, and doing better for yourself. And, any kind of pain, trauma, or suffering that you may go through in life, when you're going through it, the pain and the suffering, it makes you a more capable and enduring person. You build endurance through suffering, right? So the more pain and suffering you go through, you're going to build endurance. Through that endurance, you will build character. Character comes from suffering and being able to endure. So when you have those two things, you become this person that's eh, respectable and admired because you've gone through so much pain and you've survived, and heartache and you survived. And through character, you can create hope in men or women, right? So that's my goal now. Is I've already gone through the suffering, I've built the endurance, my character has been tested. Now it is my time to inspire and motivate and create that hope for other people to speak their voice, share their story, do whatever they got to do to heal. So that's my goal, is to be that character, and anybody can do it. You don't have to do it. You don't have to be a speaker. You don't have to get on podcasts, but at a minimum, at least heal yourself, fix yourself.
Absolutely. What did you try for healing? Did you do therapy? Did you do any modalities?
So kind of crazy. I actually have never gone through any formal therapy. I never went through anything. Like when I reported the guy, I kind of just, the next day I just kind of woke up. I was like, all right, well, I don't have anything to do this weekend, so I don't really know what's going on. But I kind of just moved on with my life. There were some things that were happening to me and things that I was doing certainly as a result of what happened, but I never really went through therapy. And the reason why I stress on therapy is because I hid it for 13 years. I just addressed this problem about 3 months ago. Like I just started talking about it about 3 months ago. And so when I went through all these years of not going through therapy, I mean, I dealt with the suicide, I dealt with depression, I dealt with the anger, the anxiety, I dealt with all these problems. And as soon as I talked about it a few months ago, and I just said, you know what, I'm just going to let the world know. Like, I don't care anymore. And boom, like the pain was gone. The weight that was on my shoulders was gone. Yeah, like I could talk about it, and the amount of support I've gotten is incredible. So there are certainly resources or types of therapy that I want to do. I want to do some like the ayahuasca or the EMDR or EDMR or EMDR. I want to try these different therapy things to see what happens, because I've heard they're very intense, and I heard they bring back a lot of like repressed memories, and I want to do them all. I just, time and money right now is my biggest constraints. But through hearing other people's stories, that's actually been very therapeutic for me. So, example would be like 3 or 4 months ago, I started listening to podcasts a lot, and I listen to them like every single day now, all day long. And so, whenever I hear somebody's story, it helps me realize, like, one, I'm not alone. Like, other people have these thoughts. This is what they've done to conquer them. This is what they've done to move on with their life. And I hear everybody else's stories, and they're certainly intense and they're certainly powerful and painful. But mine's pretty freaking heavy. We talked about it for about 20 minutes maybe, but I could go into hours and hours of details of the pain and suffering that I went through. And I've done that on other shows too. And when I do that, or I speak publicly, like if I go to an event and I do a speech, my story has helped other people, and I've gotten many, many messages about it. And so my therapy has been listening to other stories and then telling my story. Like I said at the beginning of this show, it's not about me anymore. It's about who I can help. I've been through so much hell in my life. There's 7 billion people in the world. Statistically speaking, at least half of them have been through the same hell that I have, in some form or fashion. And if I can reach just a few people in the world and tell them my story and let them heal through me, then so be it. That's powerful to me.
That's why I love doing what I do, just because there is so much shit going on out there. Other people need to know that you're not alone. It happens to other people, and you can come out better on the other side. You might not feel like it at that point in time, but if you put in the work, start to actually love yourself, self-respect, self-worth, my God, your potential is unlimited.
Yeah, I think the self-worth and respect is a big thing too. I didn't realize it until recently, probably in the last like couple weeks actually, of how much self-doubt I've actually had, because I've always been a very confident person. But then I was like thinking about it the other day, and I was like, I've actually doubted myself so much in the workplace. For example, like when I'm at work, I think I'm going to lose my job all the time, even though I'm a top performer. I just think I'm always going to lose my job for some reason, and that's that doubt speaking to you. So I have to tell myself, like, you've got this. Like, nobody's better than you. Like, nobody can. You're here first. You stay late. You work hard. You do all the things. Nobody has any reason to get rid of you. So I have to tell myself a lot. Like, these, you have self-doubt's a real thing, and you have to love yourself, and you have to encourage yourself. And what I'm trying to do now, because a lot of times I'll make comments about being dumb or being stupid or slow or whatever, and I'm just joking about it. But what I think has done is, what I've heard people say is, don't make comments about yourself that you wouldn't let somebody else make about you. So if I wouldn't let somebody else say I'm stupid and dumb and whatever, then I don't need to say it about myself, because it does eventually get into your heart and your soul, which is crazy coming from me, who's like this very confident guy, to think that, that does happen. So it's true.
Absolutely. Oh my God. I used to call myself all kinds of names. And then it's like, okay, you need to slow down.
Yeah.
You don't need to be talking to yourself like that. It's not a good look.
Right. And I would just do it out of like trying to be funny and make light of a room situation, but it does make an impact on you for sure.
Yeah, I didn't realize the impact it made either until you start really listening to the words coming out of your mouth, and you're like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
let's flip that a little bit.
Yeah.
If anyone wanted to get a hold of you to either speak, or I know you have the book coming out, what month do you anticipate that coming out?
The book, September, October, I think, is what we're looking at.
Okay. So they should go to, I have it,
Yeah,
Go Beyond the Shadows.com.
Yep. Yeah, well, my website is just my name. My website is SethGehle.com. My Instagram is Go Beyond the Shadows. My YouTube channel, same thing, Go Beyond the Shadows. So I'm not putting a ton on YouTube yet, but I do have a channel. It's got a few things on there. The cop who handled my case, the interview that I did with him is on there, which is really cool. I got to meet him like 13 years after the fact, so got to go back and thank him for that. But yeah, YouTube, Instagram is the best way really to contact me if anybody's interested or wants to follow. I encourage it. I do post a lot on Instagram. I do share quite a bit on Instagram. Yeah, but that's Go Beyond the Shadows, and I'm just looking at kicking off. Obviously, my speaking career is getting rolling, and then my book will be out later this year. And once that's out, I'm going to push, things to another level and really try to spread the word and help other people heal.
I love it. And I would love to help you in any way that I can, for sure. I love what you're doing, and I want to fight for justice as well. So I will be one of your peeps to say, look, something's got to change.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. I appreciate any opportunity I get to talk to somebody and tell my story and talk about the things that we need to fix in the world and stuff like that. So hopefully in the next few years, we can start making some of these things happen.
Hell yeah, I'm ready. I got my armor ready. We don't need it. Well, thank you so much for being here with me today, Seth. This was great. And I think a lot of people can get some good stuff out of this, especially if they are going through something similar. It's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it helps to listen and whatever you get out of it is what you get. You don't have to take everything. If there's anything that helps, that's another tool you can put in the bag. And, if anybody wants to reach out for any questions, advice, resources, I'm available. So I always respond.
I'm going to make sure I put the links in the show notes too. So that way it's easy for people to find you.
Okay, cool. I appreciate that.
All right. Well, you have yourself a good evening.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I think we all know somebody who can benefit from this episode. Please make sure to share it with them. And thank you guys so much for listening to my podcast. This really means a lot to me. If one of my episodes has helped you in any way, I would really like to know. It's important for me to know that the work that I'm doing is actually helping people. If you want more of me, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on Instagram and TikTok. If you or anyone you know is in need of national hotlines, please go to truecrimeconnections.com. I have all the phone numbers there listed for anything that you could possibly imagine. All right, my Renowned Roots community, keep building hope and gaining strength. Until next time.